Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to the 2020 Mayor Eric Garcetti and our Authors Study Club Evening with Authors. And to, thank you. We have some very exciting authors. As you know, the mayor promotes literacy in our city, and we also promote writing for those authors, many of whom happen to be from the Los Angeles area. And so every African American Heritage Month, Mayor Eric Garcetti has focused on those African Americans who have blessed us with writing about their experiences and, as a result, motivating many of our people in the great city of Los Angeles to read. Today is no exception, and to begin our program, we have many individuals who are here, but before we get started, I would like to tell you that our African American Heritage Month celebration includes focusing on many of our international achievers, many of whom are in the entertainment world, and we're very fortunate to have at least two of them here today. Erica Campbell, as you know, from the group Mary Mary, but as an author, she also has a great story to tell, so we're very glad to have Erica to my left, who is an author. And this year, we have a focus in terms of a bridge that our council president, Herb Wesson, does every year. He does a local theme around the African American experience, and this year he has chosen comedy, the art and science of comedy, of which our next celebrity, who is a comedian, Michael Collier, is one of the featured comedians on that art exhibit. So as you have walked over here, you may have seen it, but now that you didn't know it was Michael on one of those pictures, you can go back on your way out and look carefully. They can see that right down the hall. Yes, sir. And it's by our council president, Herb Wesson, who was the first African-American president of Los Angeles City Council, by the way. Also, I would like to say to you that we cannot do this work without the support of corporations. We honored, in terms of our international celebrities this year, a man who has been singing for over 50 years. You may have heard him. He was known for the Woo 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 song, Love Ballad, Jeffrey Osborne. And so he was deeply moved at our opening ceremonies to be honored this year, and we were very pleased to honor Jeffrey. Even though he has not obtained a Grammy yet, we know that that should be realized soon. Additionally, we honored a trailblazer, and this year we honored a young lady whose story is not different than many of the young people's story in the city of Los Angeles. 50% of the students in Los Angeles Unified Schools are foster children. And so one celebrity who has hit us by storm, who has done such an outstanding job, we were able to honor as our trailblazer this year none other than Tiffany Haddish.
Oh, yeah.
And that was so important because a part of her experience is having been a child in foster care here in the city of Los Angeles. So we were very pleased to show children that there is a brighter future and that there are role models who have overcome these stepping stones, and she is one. We finally honored people who have achieved in the professions, in the field of civil rights and economics, attorney Michael Lawson, a Harvard graduate who's the president of the Los Angeles Urban League. We were able to honor from University of Southern California, who worked with Northrop Grumman Corporation as the first woman to chair a Fortune 500 foundation, Sandra Evers Manley from Northrop Grumman Corporation. And then finally, we were able to honor the Education Hall of Fame awardee, Dr. Thomas Parham, who is the only male president of a college in Los Angeles County. Dr. Thomas Parham is president of California State University, Dominguez Hills. So these were the Hall of Famers that we honored along with Tiffany and Jeffrey Osborne this year. Our corporations help us fund this project. And so one of the corporations that help to fund us is one of the corporations that is a part of the great city of Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. And so for those of you all that don't know the politics of the city, one of the departments that everybody in the city wants to work for because they pay the most money is the Department of Water and Power. One of the things that I do is chair the diversity committee. We have an underrepresentation of African American engineers in the city of Los Angeles, and yet we have some 8 to 10% of the population of Los Angeles is African American. And then in looking at the data, when we look at the colleges in Los Angeles, they don't matriculate or enroll African American students by significant numbers in the engineering programs in this county. So if our managers keep running out to UCLA, USC, Northridge, and Cal State LA, they're going to keep coming back with what they come back with, which is an underrepresentation. And so as a result of chairing this committee, because the mayor appointed me to do so, every department that hires engineers is a part of this committee. And we decided that we would go to historically black colleges and universities, because this is where the African American students who live in Los Angeles go to get their engineering degrees. As a result of that, we have been there as well as we've gone to conferences. We discovered a conference called BEA, a Black Engineer of the Year Awards Conference. This conference has all of the students from historically black colleges on an annual basis in Washington, D.C. We are able to see all of those students in one room. And so we just returned there from 2 weeks ago. And as a result of the work that we have done, we have hired 38 additional new African American engineers in the city of Los Angeles. It is a pleasure for me to work with some of our African American engineers, and at the Department of Water and Power, which is a corporate sponsor of this project, we have our senior supervising water utilities engineer, I hope I got that name right, none other than Greg Reed, who's an African American engineer for the Department of Water and Power. And I want to, he's going to give comments later, but representing the mayor's office here today is David Price. I'd like for David to raise his hand from the office of the mayor. And he's going to present later on today. We're going to move the program along. And one of our commissioners here for the women of, on the status of women, the Honorable Irma Bernard. Who's here? Thank you. Before we get started, you have copies of the Lift Every Voice and Sing, better known as the Negro National Anthem. I'm going to ask you to stand so we can do the first verse of this. Michael, would you like to lead us in that? We'll ask Erica to lead us in that. Erica, you want to lead us in the first verse?
Okay, okay.
Somebody that can do it.
Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
Thank you. Thank you, Erica, for that.
You're welcome.
I see Superior Court Judge Marion Johnson out in the audience there, sir. How you doing? Nice to see you. It is a thrill, ladies and gentlemen, for us to begin this year's feature of the various authors that we have on our dais today. I'd like to start with, is it Say Hi, Essie B. Farrell? Sahai, Essie B. Farrell, and her book is Woven into the Fabric. Next to her is Josanne Marie, Beautiful, Unashamed, and Unafraid. Next to her is Michael Collier, Michael Goes Motivational.
Yes.
And a woman who has been here many times, 3 times before, in fact, who gives us some fabulous legal thrillers, Pamela Samuels Young, Failure to Protect. And to my left, another woman who needs no introduction. You know her from her great songs, but now you know her from her great book. Erica Campbell, More Than Pretty, doing the soul work that uncovers your true beauty. And to her left, it is an Amazon bestseller, Larry Pye in the Twinkle box. And to Larry's left, Seeds of Deception by Arlene L. Walker. And to Arlene's left, Rachel Housel Hall in her book, Detective Eloise Norton Series. And so we'll jump right in. One of the first questions, and we have an open talk show format. The first question that often many of us ask of our authors is, what inspired you to write this particular book that we feature here today? And we can start with whomever would like to start first. What about you, Erica? You look like you're ready.
I'll start first. I wrote this book actually because of an experience that happened at church. There was a woman I was walking past. I was about 16 years old. And she said, she's probably having sex. And I wasn't, but it made me very insecure. It made me second guess myself. It made me question myself. It made me feel like there was something wrong with being an attractive girl. And so I spent years minimizing. And experience after experience, I realized that that was a trick to stop me from being my best confident self in the career that I'm in now. To stop you as a child, it can do so many detrimental things. And so I realized that I wasn't the only girl or woman who had dealt with someone saying something negative about you that kind of made an imprint on your heart. And so having a large circle of girlfriends and a large circle of sisters, I have 7 sisters, nieces and nephews, I felt like this conversation of not focusing on the outside, owning your authority, knowing who you are and what's on the inside is much more important than what you look like. I knew that I needed to write this book. Sure. And so I did.
Sure. SEB, Woven into the Fabric. What motivated you to write Woven into the Fabric?
What motivated me to write it was...
Press the green button.
Push the, yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. What motivated me to write it is it's a novel, but it's inspired by real events in my life. And I'm a native of Los Angeles, and I was Miss Watts like years ago. But the grand prize was a all-expense-paid trip to 5 African countries as guest of the heads of state. So I was guest of Haile Selassie. I was guest of President Jomo Kenyatta. So I went to Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, Nigeria, and Ghana. And in the course of that, so my book really is about magic in real life, because in the course of that, once I met Emperor Haile Selassie, he introduced me to one of his grandsons, and we got engaged. And so I had an opportunity to go back the next year and to be a part of the Ethiopian royal family. And the following year, there was a coup, and the whole family was arrested, including my fiance, and imprisoned. And so that happened, but 5 years later, I was married to a councilman from Los Angeles, and he played a part and Ethiopians with Trans-Africa, and Ethiopians came to me at one of our receptions, and they said they were about to be deported, the ones who had fled at the time of the coup. And so, could you get your husband to help? And so Bob was on Trans-Africa, and Randall Robinson, Maxine Waters, and they actually got unofficial asylum for all the Ethiopians in America from President Carter. And I just want people to know that African Americans, as we see the blooming Ethiopian communities around, were a part of the fact that they are here. Wow. So, yeah.
Thank you. And Larry? The Twinkle Box.
Yes.
What inspired you to write The Twinkle Box?
Okay, I was inspired to write this book years ago. I worked at juvenile hall, and I was selected to supervise a minor that was severely suicidal. He had tried to commit suicide 6 different times, drinking bleach, hanging, cutting his wrist. So they asked me to supervise the kid. When I first met him, he was about 10 years old, a very intelligent kid, but really disturbed. And so my initial meeting with him was, I went in his room, the guy that introduced me to him said, "This is Mr. Pye." And this guy jumped on the bed and started cussing, said, "Don't you touch me, else I'll kill you like I'm gonna kill my dad when I get out of here." Wow. And the guy said, "Okay, Mr. Pye, he's all yours, have a nice day."
Wow.
And so the kid's screaming, and he's just saying, "I'm not going to get down. You can't make me not kill myself." And I said, "I got to get this kid's attention." I said, "Hold on, son. I don't know you. You're 10 years old. Maybe you have a reason to not want to live. Let's talk about it." I said, "I don't know anything about you. And if you have a good enough reason, I think I'll help you." His eyes got big. He said, "Really?" I said, "Maybe we have to talk about it." Well, once I got to know the kid, we walked around the facility, and then he started telling about his dad. And this dad was a very prominent businessman, and this guy just would torture him in bizarre ways that you just couldn't believe. Even we were playing basketball, he never missed. I said, "How are you so good? You should be with the NBA." He says, "Whenever I missed with my dad, he would lift me up and bang my head against the rim." He said, "That's why I have these scars." Well, he did have scars, but I thought it was because, a suicidal kid. But anyway, once I got to know him, he would share these stories with me. I still thought it was weird. But anyway, years later, I'm going to fast forward, I left juvenile hall, and I was in the field. And I went to a conference, and I met this lady, because when I signed in, she said, "Pye, what an unusual name." I said, "Tell me about it." So she turned out to be the psychiatric social worker for this kid, and she told me everything that he said was true. And so I decided this kid always wanted to be an attorney or a police officer to bring his dad to justice. I decided to make him a Johnny Cochran type attorney and go back into his life. So that's why I said this is loosely based on a true story and all the events that led up to him being abused and then being successful, and it's really just an interesting story. So that's what inspired me to write the book.
Thank you for that. Beautiful, Unashamed, and Unafraid. Josanne Marie, what inspired you?
Well, Beautiful started first with a solo play that I did. It's a one-woman show. And we had a 4-week run at the LATC down here in downtown LA. And it really, the play started off with me just wanting to share a story about my own personal life and testimony of overcoming childhood abuse from the age of 6 to 16. And that you don't have to, allow a tragic event to be the final narrative of your life. And I wanted to encourage people with that story. And so it started with the play. I never intended on writing a book, but as I was doing the play, as you know, whenever you kind of step out on faith, it's always bigger than you, right? God has a plan. And so during that time, I would have a talk back at each show. And people would just stand up in the audience and they would share their secrets, things that they've never told anyone. They would share in this, forum. And one that stood out to me was the last night before my run, a 74-year-old Jewish woman came up to me after the show, and she was just standing there. And as I was walking over to her, she just started weeping and shaking. And I got to her, and she looked at me, and she said, "Young lady, when I was 8, I was raped. And tonight is the first time I'm telling anyone." Wow. And I just remember how that hit me, because I was standing there as this 30-something Jamaican woman and this Jewish woman in her 70s, and there was, at that moment, we felt like two lost sisters who understood a certain language, and that it took her over 60-something years to really share something like that, and the weight and the burden that she was carrying. And I just saw the need and the importance that she stood for many women who have been eulogized with secrets that took them to their grave, that they've never told anyone. And so Beautiful, that was the birth of Beautiful, to say that you don't have to be afraid, and you don't have to be ashamed, and hopefully you don't have to wait 63 years. So
Great, thank you for that. Seeds of Deception, Arlene, what inspired you to write?
Well, in addition to being a writer, I'm also my family's family historian, self-appointed. And so I was sitting at home one day researching my family tree when I uncovered a great-great-grandmother who was born a slave. No big surprise there. But she had not been enslaved by white people. She had been enslaved by Cherokee Indians. And that blew me away. I had never heard of anything like that. I don't know if you guys have, but I was so blown away, I had to do more research. And what I discovered was just extraordinary. And so I said to myself, someone should write a story about this. And I looked, and no one had. There was no story about Cherokee freedmen. So I took Toni Morrison's advice when she said to write the story you want to read. Mm-hmm. And so Seeds of Deception was born.
Great. Michael goes motivational. Michael Collier, what inspired you to go motivational and write this book?
You know, I'm happy you asked. How y'all doing? Hello, everybody. How y'all feel?
All right.
Thank y'all for coming in. You know, I'm a comedian and actor, motivational speaker, and so this story is really about my life. I'm an addict. That's the first thing I always like people to know. I did crack for 23 years, and as of March 1st, I have 9 years of pure sobriety, and so I talk about it. Thank you. I talk about it everywhere I go. Stop people in the street, and they say, "Why are you telling me?" I say, "I'm telling everybody." So the story actually follows my life, you know, coming up in the projects, you know, with no money and stuff, and then learning how to be a comedian and an actor, and then that brought me to California, where I learned how to make money doing it, and, you know, then once I got that money, like Robin Williams said, cocaine is God's way of saying you're making too much money. So I got that money, and I found a rock one day. I said, I wonder what would happen if I dropped that on a hot piece of glass. Anyway, 23 years later, I found myself digging my way out of that. But it was a fabulous story about all of it, the growth of it, the people that I met. And mostly the most important person I got to meet myself and to find out who I really am. And I learned along this journey that everything's about family and God. And once you get family and God down, everything else takes care of itself, and you can turn things around and create magic from knowing that one secret, that everything's about family and God. So in this book, it is a motivational book. It has jokes, but it also has stories. This is my life that unfolds, and it also breaks down motivational things to help you get back on whatever path you have fallen off of, but it keeps reminding you over and over that everything is about family and God. And God is so simple that people think it's complicated, and they're like, oh, it can't be that easy, but life was meant to be very simple. It was meant to be easy, and so it really is easy once you get back to the basic truth. And so it's called Michael Goes Motivational. I'll be using it to do motivational speeches around the country. And I take green stamp, food stamps, Canadian money. No, okay, I'm sorry. That's it. That's sorry. That's it.
Rachel Housel Hall, you have a detective series, in fact, Detective Eloise Norton series. Tell us what motivated you to write this series?
The city actually inspired me to write this series as well as all my books, actually. I am a native of Los Angeles. I actually, one of the people, I love LA. Yes. We have problems, but
Yes.
LA, right? And I write mystery and crime, so LA is also a great place to leave a lot of bodies. So there's that. But for the Detective Eloise series, Land of Shadows being the first, like you just mentioned, Toni Morrison said, write the story that you want to read. And I grew up, I'm a Gen Xer, and so as a mystery reader, I read Raymond Chandler and Philip Marlowe, Walter Mosley, Michael Connelly, all these people, but I never saw myself. I never saw the girls that I went to UC Santa Cruz and pledged with. I never saw them in these mysteries. So I wanted to write a story where it was like Terry McMillan meets Walter Mosley in Los Angeles, and she's a cop who grew up in the jungle, which is where I grew up.
Wow.
Nice.
Who, you know, when Do the Right Thing came out, and she saw it in Westwood like I did, and came out to Riot Police like I did. So I wanted to take, you know, my life in LA and my friends' lives in LA and put them in these mysteries that, yes, entertain, which, you know, mysteries and crime do, but also kind of talk about what's happening in the city, gentrification and class wars and race wars and the brown and black and all of it. And that's why I wrote this series.
For that. Pamela Samuels-Young, we know of her work. This work, though, this year featured is Failure to Protect. Pam, what motivated you to focus on failure to protect?
I write legal thrillers. I'm an attorney. I write legal thrillers. I'm also an attorney and a product of the Compton school system, a proud product of the Compton school system. For years, I would love reading John Grisham's book, but I would never see anybody in them who looked like me. And one day I decided that I was going to write a book and I was going to be the main character. And that took off, my writing career took off from then. Failure to Protect is my 14th book. Wow. Typically something that moves me, spurs me to write. On Christmas Day 2018, a friend of mine sent me 2 separate articles about 2 little 9-year-old girls in Alabama who had taken their own lives. How does a 9-year-old know how to hang themselves?
Wow.
And it weighed on me all night. The next morning, I went online and I just started looking up, and they had both been bullied, bullying and child suicide.
Yes.
And all I saw, when you looked under 12, all you saw were black kids.
Yes.
And nobody's talking about this. The suicide rate for African American kids under 12 is twice that of white kids. In August, the Congressional Black Caucus called it a national health crisis, and there is now a commission trying to figure out why. I wanted to educate people about bullying, and I came up with a storyline about a mother who sues the school district. And my villain is a principal who is more concerned about her job and her school's reputation than saving her kids. I take you through the legal process. It is a legal thriller. There are twists and turns, but you're also going to learn something. And also it's going to have you learn something that can protect the kids in your life. Failure to Protect.
Nice.
Great, thank you. Give us a sample of some of the lessons to be learned in the book. And with that, we can start. You want to start first, Pam? Okay,
Go for it.
Samuels-Young.
I'm going to pick it up at a section where the main character who's being bullied, her name is Bailey, and her uncle, because her father has passed away, shows up at school to find out what's going on. The uncle gets a call where they say something's happened to Bailey was involved in an incident. We need you to come to the school. So he walks to the principal's office, and the following takes place. Is Bailey okay? Where is she? Have a seat. Darcella Freeman extended her hand toward a chair in front of the desk. I'm afraid we have a very serious problem. Is Bailey okay? He asked again. Physically, yes, but I fear she may have some emotional problems. Whatever had gone down, Dre was not about to let them pin it on Bailey. What happened? Bailey confronted a group of girls in the cafeteria. Dre rolled his eyes. Timid, tiny little Bailey confronted not one girl, but a group of girls? Yeah, right. One of the teachers on duty saw Bailey stand up and slam her tray down on the table. That doesn't sound like a confrontation to me, and if Bailey did that, she had a reason. What did the girls do to her? Another fourth grader accidentally squirted some ketchup on Bailey's sweater. Her reaction was quite disproportionate. I'm very concerned about her mental state. Bailey's mental state is fine. Did that teacher also see that girl accidentally squirt ketchup on her? No, she didn't. Of course not. She's with Dr. Andrews right now, from the district psychologist from the district office. Dre leaned forward in his chair, his jaw tightening. Why would you think she needed to see a shrink for slamming a cardboard tray on a table, even if she did do that? Well, when a student threatens violence against another student, we have to take it seriously. You're kidding me, right? It wasn't just Bailey's actions. It's what she said that troubled us the most. Dre was getting tired of this witch dispensing facts like card in a slow game of poker. And what did she supposedly say? He wasn't buying any of this until he spoke to Bailey. She threatened to kill her classmate. Dre could tell the principal expected a reaction from him. He refused to give her one. If Bailey said that, I bet the girl was doing a lot more than squirting her with ketchup. She's a 9-year-old kid. You're making a big deal out of nothing. I beg to differ. The principal's face glowed with smugness. In this day and age of school shootings, we can't afford to ignore any threat of violence. Frankly, you should be thanking me for not calling the police.
Great.
Nice.
So next I'm going to ask Rachel Hall.
I'm going to be reading from Land of Shadows, which is the first of the series, and in this scene, Detective Eloise Norton, my main character, and her partner Colin are about to make a death notification to the victim of this book named Monique Darson. The Darson house was a slate gray, 2-story Spanish style protected by a decorative wrought iron fence. A red Maserati was parked in a driveway behind a black Toyota 4Runner and a white Toyota Prius. The neighborhood was a hybrid too. Some houses had been purchased by professionals who mowed their lawns and hosted church potlucks, while other houses were rented by those people. Families with dangerous-looking youths wearing long white T-shirts who sat on the porch all day, smoking cigarillos and chronic, getting shot on the regular, cursing so much you had to bring the kids in and give them baths to rinse off the neighborhood filth. Earlier this year, I had visited Garthwaite Avenue, work-related, of course. A 15-year-old gangbanger, also a father of 2, had been murked on the sidewalk just 4 houses down from the Darsons. Before we approached the front door, I clutched Colin's arm. We will not tell them up front that she's dead. They'd be too shaken up to tell us anything useful. And we will not mention the belt or the fingernails. Colin said, got it, and then finished crunching his mouth full of Tic Tacs. I shifted the growing case file to my other hand and held my breath as I rang the door. Like any cop, I hated family notifications. You never knew how folks were going to act. In normal situations, they wailed and sobbed, pleaded with God and the LAPD for justice. In abnormal situations, families wanted to fight me, or they sat on the couch, sphinx-like, and said, oh, okay. Colin also took several deep breaths as we waited for someone to answer the door. His eyes shifted back to the sidewalk, to the golf club, wielding old couple walking their terrier, to the mother herding 3 young children into a minivan, and finally to the red Maserati, sexing up the Darson's driveway. The Maz was a fancy car for most neighborhoods, including this one. A woman wearing a bus driver's uniform answered the door. She could have been my age or a bit older. A pink scarf covered her hair. Her lips, plum-colored from smoking, wore breadcrumbs and a frown. She was not pleased that someone was ringing her doorbell so early in the morning. I showed her my badge and introduced Colin and myself as homicide detectives. The woman's scowl worsened. What's this about? Colin glanced at me. Had she not heard the word homicide, the biggest clue to what this visit was about? Are you the mother of Monique Darson, I asked. Yes, she said, I'm Angie Darson. What's wrong? May we come in, I asked. Mama, a young woman shouted from inside the house. Who is it? Angie didn't answer her daughter and continued giving me the too early in the morning for this bullshit stink eye. I glanced past Angie and into the house at that young woman, who was about 21 or so, standing at the bottom of the staircase. Whoever she was, she wore a fuchsia and gold Pucci scarf on her head and a silk robe covered in Dolce & Gabbana's logo. Mama, what's going on? Get your father, Angie said over her shoulder. After the girl had run up the stairs, Angie turned back to us. What did she do? Is this about Derek? I offered a comforting smile, hoping that Colin would write Derek, the same Derek from Monique's suicide note. into his pad as soon as possible. This will be easier if you let us come in. She stood there, though, unmoving, blocking our way as though we were vampires, thinking about what I was asking her to do. Finally, she sighed and stepped aside. Guess she had heard some sexy things about vampires. I don't have much time, she snapped. I'm already running late. The house smelled of cigarettes, coffee, fried bacon, and toast. The morning news played on the newish LCD television bolted to the living room wall. Old crap was mixed in with new crap. A new leather sofa and love seat alongside a stained corduroy armchair, a new antiquish lamp placed atop a tired area rug with shedding tassels, a yellowing porcelain ashtray sitting on a new cherry coffee table. Someone had won the showcase showdown on The Price is Right.
I want you to go with me because I feel that Los Angeles sent me on this magnificent trip when I was 21 years old, and I want you to feel what it felt like for a 21-year-old girl to meet Emperor Haile Selassie for the first time. So the character in the book is named Brenna. Brenna had 3 companions she was traveling with, and they were at the Jubilee Palace in Ethiopia waiting to have audience with the emperor. And they were learning how to curtsy, and suddenly a man came in and said, "It's time." And he said, "But His Majesty would like to see Miss Hayes alone first." And so she enters by herself. The emperor stood to receive her as she approached him. He smiled as she presented her recently rehearsed curtsy. He smiled back and acknowledged his kindness and to amend for any awkwardness. When their eyes met, it felt like a return, like a familiarity. "Welcome, Miss Hayes. How are you, and how have you enjoyed your stay in my country so far?" The emperor's voice was thin, and his eyes smiled. "I'm well, thank you, Your Majesty. I'm honored to have this audience with you. I'm having a wonderful time in Ethiopia." "Parlez-vous français?" "Do you speak French, Miss Hayes?" "Un peu," she responded. "Very well, then. I speak a little English myself, and so between the two, we should be able to communicate. So tell me about your studies at the university." "I'd be happy to. I'm an English pre-med major at Stanford University." "I haven't decided what—" "Excuse me." His Majesty turned to address an attendant. "Bring a chair for Miss Hayes." The emperor sat on his throne. After she settled in her chair, she chatted about college highlights and told him about Watts. He smiled, even chuckled, and encouraged her to continue with small questions along the way. Without any effort, she was amusing him. "My dear," he said, he quietly interrupted, "where are your people from?" "Arkansas, Texas, Louisiana," Brenda said. "No, I mean where in Africa?" She paused, a little confused, a little embarrassed. "Well, Your Majesty, with slavery and all, we really don't know where in Africa we're from." "Yes, I see," he said. "But I know where you're from," he stated emphatically. Then he leaned forward toward her and rested his forearms on his knees. He held her eyes in his gaze. "Miss Hayes, you are a princess from the royal lineage of the House of Judah, my house, and I know my own anywhere," he declared. After a pause, he added, "And we just have to make the adjustments." And he sat back in his throne. That's it.
Okay, now before I read the prologue, I just want to point out that in my book, there's drama, there's intrigue, there's romance, there's friendship. If you want a little horror, I think there's some horror in here, and there's compassion. So there's something for everybody. So I don't want you to treat this part that I'm going to read as that's what the whole book is about, because that's not true. But I promise you, this book will take you on quite a ride. Okay, so I'm going to read the prologue. Detroit, Michigan, September of 1982. The blood-curdling screams of the small child echoed through the house. "Mommy, Mommy, help me!" Ella Mae's body stiffened. She stumbled back a few steps. The wet plate slid through her soapy fingers and shattered across the linoleum floor. Slivers of glass stung her ankles as she ran out of the kitchen door. "Lester," she shouted, screaming his name as she tripped over a dining room chair. "Please, God, not again." She pleaded while she scrambled to her feet. "Mommy, I'm coming, baby," she yelled as she heard a lamp crash and the grating sound of a table being dragged across the floor like fingernails scraping over a chalkboard. Ella Mae's body froze in terror at the sight of the large man bending over the small child with his fist drawn back. "Edward, get away from him." "Shut up, woman. This kid needs to be taught a lesson," he bellowed. "For God's sake, why can't you just give him a spanking if he needs one?" she begged while grabbing his broad shoulder. "Bullshit. Spankings are for sissies. I'm going to make a man out of him." He jerked away from her grasp. Ella Mae paused for a moment and released a defeated moan. Years of beatings had turned the former campus beauty queen into a submissive, washed-out shell of her former self. Where there was smoothness in her cheeks, there was now only roughness and deep lines caused by stress and worry. A sunken, bony face with no contour had replaced her attractive appearance. The once beautiful brown eyes were puffy with red blood vessels from months of crying in silence. She watched desperately as the only thing in her drab life that brought her pride reached out to her. "Mommy, please," the boy begged. Her stomach ached from the surge of rage that was inside her. "I can't let you do that to my baby again. You better mind your own damn business, woman." With a single bound, she dove on his brawny back. Her fingernails broke off as she clawed at his powerful arms. She sank her teeth into the sweaty, salty flesh of his thick neck. Her body flung from side to side as he tried violently to shake her loose. The child tumbled to the floor as Edward reached back and grabbed a handful of Ella Mae's hair. Blood flooded her brain. Her eyeballs swelled as if they were going to pop out of their sockets. Her piercing scream reverberated through the room like the cry of a tortured animal. She felt her head savagely jerked backwards as hair tore away from her scalp and droplets of blood splattered across the wall. "Get off me, woman." His knuckles cracked across her jaw. She crashed to the floor. "Ah!" she shrieked from the excruciating pain of his fist on her cheek, her mouth filled with blood and chipped teeth as her head banged against the floor. "I warned you, bitch," he shouted while bourbon-drenched spit splashed across her face. Ella Mae gasped for air as large muscular fingers clamped around her throat. Strong arms lifted her in midair. She soared across the room, slamming into a wall. Her battered torso vibrated as a semi-conscious body slid down the partition to the floor. "Oh, Mommy, no," Lester cried as he scurried to his feet. A hand grabbed his ankle, jerking him in the opposite direction. A sharp pain shot through his leg. "Forget it, you little asshole. She can't help you now." The boy's head throbbed while it bounced on the hardwood floor as he was dragged away. "Let go of that, you little bastard." He pried Lester's fingers loose from the door jamb. "Mommy, Mommy." Lester made one desperate plea while thrashing his frail body as Edward hauled him away like a fish being dragged from the ocean. Ella Mae laid on her back in a pool of blood and sweat. She stared blankly at the ceiling. Blood seeped from her mouth. Salty perspiration oozed from her teary, bloodshot eyes, obscuring her vision, and she struggled to roll over onto her side. But the bleeding elbows and the broken arm made it a feeble attempt, and her body went limp. Her head stung as it collapsed to the floor. The muffled screams of her beloved baby could be heard as he was brutally taken to the dark basement. The cellar door closed. Now no screams could be heard. She closed her eyes and prayed, "Lord, please don't let my baby die."
Okay, whenever. Yeah. Hey, okay, so my book is called Michael Goes Motivational. I have to tell you guys, I'm a novice. Although this is my third book, I still think I'm just learning this. My first book is a children's book on the greatest president ever, Barack Obama. It's called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the White House. I knocked on the door and a brother answered. And then I wrote a poetry book that's called Miss Innocent Goes to Cool School and Other Silly Stuff. It's a poetry book for adult children, and it's great poetry, but it's not like a narrative or a story. This book really comes out of the play that I'm doing. So I'm doing a 100-city play called Michael Kaya's Mama. If you like your mama, you're going to love this play. The reason that I love who I look at when I look in the mirror is because of my mother and God. And so this story comes from all the stuff that I learned and from being with her and how come I'm back on the right track now. So I'm just going to take a passage. Two drunks were sitting at the bar. First drunk turned to the second drunk. He said, "Did you sleep with my wife last night?" Second drunk said, "Not a wink, not a wink." Okay. Daily, I am reminded of the importance of being true to self, clear in intention, and kind to others whenever possible, but never forsake or dishonor yourself for the sake of making others feel better about themselves. Never shortcut yourself. Don't downplay yourself to make other people feel good about themselves. I'm going to tell you, there's going to be people who's going to try to make you feel worse about what you're doing. Anytime you commit to something, there becomes a glow and a light about you that some people who spend most of their time in the darkness will try to shut down. There's people who aren't going to believe in you because they don't believe in themselves. I mean, who the hell are you to be somebody when I ain't shit? So they'll try to pull you down. People always try to tell you something you can't do, don't go for it. They told the Wright brothers, those guys who invented the airplanes, that thing would never work. It'll never get off the ground. It'll never take off. They told Ripley he'd never have a successful museum, believe it or not. They called Alexander Graham Bell on the phone and said, this thing ain't never gonna work. Don't let people tell you what you can or cannot do. Believe in yourself, embrace yourself, be kind to others, and keep walking forward towards the light that shines for you. Okay.
Erica Campbell.
So I think the best part of my book is the affirmations and learning who I am and what I want to say to myself about myself, because the most important conversation you will have is with yourself, especially as it relates to what you've been through. So I want to share.
Oh, can I just tell them you got nominated for the NAACP award for that book?
2 times.
2 times. Thank you.
Thank you. I am more than my eyes, my beauty, and my stride. I am built by my trials. I am defined by my confidence and my strength, my love for life and respect for others. I am defined by my powerful smile. God is my creator and my source. His design is perfect, and therefore I am perfected daily in Christ. For I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Yes, I am so much more than pretty. I am working toward being better, stronger, wiser, and I'm becoming a better sister, friend, mother, daughter, and woman. God's love leads and guides me. It causes me to shine from the inside out. I am so much more than pretty. I am a reflection of God's love for me to the whole world.
Nice.
Josanne Marie.
Sure. I'm going to read from the chapter of Vertical Leap, and this, just to preface it, started with me for my birthday one year. I decided that I was going to do a trapeze jump at Santa Monica, and I'm scared of heights, but not that height, yes. Mm-hmm. So I decided to do it, and I realized there's a part where you have to hold on, and they push you. They won't push you until you're ready to jump. So you'll get the idea of this, paragraph that I'm going to read. But once I jump, you have to let go. Mm-hmm. And I realized that I wasn't scared of the jump. Mm-hmm. I was scared of letting go because I wasn't sure I was going to be caught.
Come on.
Which everything was there. Everything was safe, but that was like the main thing. So anyway, beautiful. The book is not just about being sexually molested. It deals with different issues. We all have childhood issues that sometimes we don't deal with. So many of us are still carrying childhood wounds that are preventing us from jumping into our destiny. Mm-hmm. Whenever we want change, we must take vertical leaps. The trapeze was built strong and safe enough to carry me, but it was going to take me pressing past my inner fears to experience a ride of a lifetime. Because of various issues in our lives, we tend to doubt God's integrity to catch us when we take a leap of faith. But faith is faith, no matter how big or small it appears. Faith will always be rewarded. This is why the scripture says, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, it will move mountain. Yes. I'm convinced that there's no one sin than unbelief. Unbelief can lead us to make irrational decisions that will ultimately delay the promise or destroy our destiny. We cannot desire a new experience with God without doing anything different. A new you will require new adjustments. It takes vertical leaps to experience miracles. The day I grabbed hold of the truth that the one who created me loved me beyond my understanding, I was transformed. I decided to no longer live my life from my experiences, but from the perspective of truth. We don't have to be that girl who just takes what life throws at us. We don't have to sell ourselves short because everything about us is made in God's splendor. We no longer have to live from the place of defeat, but the place of victory. We don't have to operate from a place of brokenness. Let the truth take root in our souls. Give the old you a funeral. Be ready to jump every time life calls for it. Get up from that shameful place and jump. Jump into a relationship with God. Jump into new friendships. Jump on a new career path. Jump out of old habits. Jump into joy. Jump from brokenness to wholeness. Live a life of continuous leaping. When we jump, that's when the miracle takes place. The bravest thing I've ever done was to live. It takes courage to live an authentic life when our circumstances deem us as regular and show us that there's nothing to live for. I'm not just talking about living in the sense of breathing and going about the day, but living the life God intended despite the detours. No matter who you are and what race or gender, life happens to us all. It is how we deal with it that will prove what we are made of. I'm here to tell you that the good news, victims can be victors. Get back into the ring of life.
Come on now. You better read that.
Thank you. I neglected to tell you the plot of Seeds of Deception. It's a story about a woman, Sput Louis McClendon, a former slave of the Cherokee Nation. Her husband suddenly vanishes, and in her search to find him, she stumbles upon a dark, twisted secret that has devastating implications for her. The snippet I'm about to read is when she gets her first clue as to her husband's disappearance, and it comes from an unlikely source, a man named Cynics Lynch, who works for the man who used to own Sput Louis. I come to warn you, Cynic said when they reached the edge of the yard lined with rocks instead of a fence. Benjamin, too, if he around here, his eyes darted about the property. A ripple of nerves shuddered down Sput's spine. She neither confirmed nor denied her husband's presence. Warn him about what? As if he were about to divulge the most sinister of secrets, Cynics looked from side to side. Then he stared at her with his lips parted and his eyes softening. Benjamin had always said that Cynics had eyes for her, that he just wanted to lie at her feet and soak up her shade. Sput had laughed and told him to get on away from her with that foolishness. But then Benjamin said that beauty was not always the draw. Sometimes a man prized a good woman. To tell you the truth, Miss Sput, Cynic said with a pointed stare, I'm warning you. Warning me about what? Mr. Lynch's prize horse was stole yesterday. Furred? She said. Yep, stole right out the barn. Cynic shook his head in disbelief. You know how Mr. Lynch loved him some fur. Finest horse around, always putting it up against other horses. Sput sucked in a breath while her mind began to whirl like a spindle. And that got to do with Benjamin what? She raised a brow as the spindle toppled by a sudden realization. You trying to say my being stole him? She pouted her lips. My husband ain't no thief. Never stole nothing a day in his life. She put her hands on her hips. A blacksmith don't need no axe and Benjamin don't need no horse. Not a stolen one. And why would he steal a horse anyway? Where he gonna hide it? We ain't got no barn. What he gonna do with it where people couldn't see he had it? How he gonna? Cynics held up both palms to halt her ripping into him. I ain't saying he did it, he paused. Mr. Lynch is. Sput scratched her cheek in contemplation. He done gone and told the Anti-Horse Thief Society too, Cynic said. Annie who? She pronounced anti the same way Cynics had. Wado.
Wow.
We have the president of our Author Study Club. As you know, African American Heritage Month in Los Angeles was started around 1948 when a group of women, African American women, got together with Mayor Fletcher Bowen. I didn't hear of him either until this story. Of course, that was 1948, long before my time. And during that period of time, they wanted to reflect Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who's the founder of Black Studies, effort to make sure that those people in America knew of the positive contributions African Americans had made in general, but our Author Study Club wanted to make sure we knew in particular what African Americans had done in California. And so it is my honor to ask our Author Study Club, who still helps conduct African American Heritage Month in the city of Los Angeles, now with Mayor Eric Garcetti, to give some brief remarks, after which we're going to have those of you in the audience to have your books signed by our authors. I don't know if the authors want to ask or answer, rather, any questions from the audience. If so, okay, you want to do one or two? So we'll do one or two, but the main purpose of this is to come up and get them to sign your books as well. So with that, we'll take two questions for the authors. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to thank the Author Study Club for selecting me to be up here with this distinguished panel of authors. This is my first time, and I'm honored that you guys even selected me. So I just wanted to thank you.
Any questions for our authors from the audience? Not everybody.
I see one over there.
Yes, ma'am. How long did it take you to write your book?
21 years.
It took me 3 years to write my first book, just getting up early in the morning, late at night, weekends, because I don't believe the excuse that there's not enough time. If it's something that you really want to do, you make time. I can typically do one now in about a year, but that first book, about 3 years.
Well, I wrote mine after I did the play. The play took me about 6 months to write the play once I decided that I wanted to tell this story. So then I just sort of took the book and created it so people could just read the story as opposed to having to see the play. So I would say about 6 months for me, and all I was doing is recounting stuff I've been through. Yeah.
Roseanne.
For me, it took 2 years to write the book because I was doing the play and performing the play, and I performed it for over 4 years and still performing it, and it took me just 2 years to just really sit down and put everything, pen everything. So.
SCB.
I already said 21 years, and because I was living the book, I actually had to go back to Ethiopia. There were things in the book that I didn't know I had to actually experience so the book would be finished.
Wow.
Erica.
Wow. For me, my More Than Pretty process started in 2015 when I did my first more than pretty experience. It was a conversation on Christianity and sexuality. We don't usually hear those two topics together. But when I realized that this was a book, it took me about 2 years to write the book.
Larry.
Okay, well, for me, let me see, I started 10 years ago, but it was like you start writing something, then life happens. You know, you change jobs, you move, you start a family, so you shelve this stuff, okay? So I've been writing off and on, but when I retired from probation about maybe 8 or 9 years ago, I said, let me just finish this. That was on my list of things to do. And so I just finished it. I said, I'm going to see where this goes. Now I'm writing my second novel. Now that I'm retired and I can pretty much do what I want, I'm probably on chapter maybe 17 or 18, and I could probably finish this in a couple of months because I don't have the distractions.
Yes.
You know, the main thing I would suggest to writers that even when you kind of get this writer's block, just write. Just write.
Yeah.
And stuff. So,
Great.
yeah.
Thank you.
Did you say you on probation?
I'm sorry.
Did you say you're on probation?
No, I'm a retired probation officer.
Oh.
I probably should have been on probation. But
Arlene Walker.
Well, it took me a good 5 or 6 years to write this book. It's my first novel, but in my defense, I did 2 years of research, and I was in UCLA Writers Program for 3 years. So during that time is when I finished the book.
Rachel
My
Howes.
My 9th book will be published in September of this coming year, and it seems from the first book to this book, it takes me about 9 months. Part of it is I write for a living. I'm at Cedars-Sinai, and I write in the fundraising department, and what a full-time job will make you do is to have discipline. And so like Pamela over here, I get up early and get to work, write, and then do my day job, and soccer practice, I write, whatever. You just put it in, and like you just said, you write even when you don't feel like it.
Right.
I had a quick question. Do we have any teachers in the audience? Raise your hand if you're teachers. Yeah, so one of the reasons I encourage teachers to write, and so one of the reasons my book took so long is because I only got to write in the summer because I was a full-time English teacher and instructional coach. So if you're a writer as a teacher, take advantage of your vacations to write.
Thank you so much for that.